This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. 2 of Santa's reindeer, Comet and Dancer, got loose on a busy roadway in Texas just days before Christmas. Think we're joking? It happened halfway between Houston and Galveston. The reindeer's owner, Joe Mormon, is a professional Santa Claus, also known as Father Christmas or St. Nicholas or Kris Kringle. But unlike many other Santas, this one really does travel in a sleigh pulled by reindeer, except when he has to transport them. On December 14th, the back door of the trailer opened as he was driving them to an elementary school. Comet and Dancer escaped onto Interstate 45, not exactly the North Pole. Another driver alerted Santa, as he told TV station KTRK. Someone pulled up beside us, actually, and blew the horn and was waving and all that, and told us we had some animals loose. Well, my heart did not do too well. The morning traffic was heavy but slow, with people on their way to work. Drivers called the police, who at first thought they were joking. Yes, there really were reindeer in the road. Then Santa found that he had some helpers. People stopped traffic and got out of their cars. One woman took off her shoes and ran after the reindeer. Another person followed. But the reindeer themselves were the ones who ended the chase. They found a park and stopped to eat. Joe Mormon says he was more shaken than they were. He says, God was with the reindeer, you know, and he takes care of fools and things that cannot take care of themselves. The story had a happy ending. Santa and his reindeer were able to visit the school children as promised. The Reindeer Owners and Breeders Association says reindeer are easy to train to pull a cart or sleigh. Greg Finstad at the University of Alaska Fairbanks says reindeer like people and are pleasant to have around. He says reindeer management is not very difficult. That's good, since he also says, and children might want to cover their ears for this part, reindeer is a basic meat in the cold climate of Alaska. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can watch a story about the runaway reindeer by KTRK reporter Deborah Wrigley at voaspecialenglish.com. Special English is VOA's daily news and information service for people learning English. You can also get English lessons 3 times a day, Monday through Friday, at the VOA Learning English page on Facebook.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. The United Nations estimates that world food production will have to increase by 70% by 2050. A world population growing in number and wealth will require 1 billion tons more grain each year and 200 million tons more meat. The Food and Agriculture Organization says those gains will have to happen largely on existing land through sustainable intensification. Officials say the new report provides the first global assessment of the state of the planet's land resources. It says large parts of all continents are experiencing damage. 1/4 of all land is described as highly degraded. The greatest threats are losses of soil quality, biodiversity, and water resources. New agricultural methods and technology increased food production in many countries during the Green Revolution. Cropland increased by 12% from 1961 to 2009, yet production grew by 150%. But the new report warns that production rates have been slowing in many areas. In too many places, it says, practices that have increased production have also harmed the land and water. It calls for greater use of practices that can expand production while limiting damage to ecosystems. One such practice is the use of fertilizer trees. These are fast-growing trees and shrubs whose leaves and roots help improve soil. A recent study found that about 400,000 farmers in southern Africa are using them. The study appeared in the International Journal of Agricultural Sustainability. Lead author Alayede Ajudi is senior scientist at the World Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, Kenya. He says, basically, these are trees that can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert them into nitrates for fertilizer, for organic fertilizer. Farmers who planted fertilizer trees reported double the maize production of other farmers. In Zambia, the fertilized fields provided up to 114 additional days of food. Farmers say they need less rainwater if they use fertilizer trees. The trees reduce water runoff and soil erosion. Mr. Ajayi says the project began about 20 years ago when scientists were trying to identify the main threats to food security. The farmers themselves designed and managed part of the testing in the field and spread the word of their successes. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Mike Henry has a 2-hectare farm in Palmer, Alaska. About a year and a half ago, his goat Millie was giving him a hard time. She did not want to be milked. She kicked her back legs and stepped into the bucket that was supposed to catch her milk. But there was no milk to catch. All Mike Henry got was tired hands from his attempts to milk her. But he also got an idea. He designed a goat milking machine that does not require any electricity or motors. The Henry Milker is a hand-operated vacuum pump. A person attaches a tube to the goat, and after a little pumping, the milk begins to flow. A gauge measures the pressure of the suction. The process uses a closed system to keep hair and dirt out of the milk. The milk goes directly from the goat into a container that is then placed in the refrigerator to keep the milk cold. Mike Henry has sold his invention to hundreds of people, mainly small farmers, who also hold other jobs, just as he does. Mr. Henry is an executive director in the Anchorage School District in Alaska. He considered spending more than $1,000 for an electric milking machine. But that seemed like a lot of money to milk just one goat. So he began to develop a device of his own. He worked with parts that he bought from an auto supply store and a Walmart store. He tried the invention on Millie. How did she react? She gave a little milk. As the months passed, he improved the device. Milking Millie became easy. Mike Henry began to think other people who owned just a few goats might be interested in his invention. So he offered one on eBay, an internet marketplace. The first one sold for $45. Interest grew. Today, he receives orders from as far away as Australia and New Zealand. The regular price is $149. Recently, he has offered the system for $119 plus shipping and handling charges at goatfinder.com. The system is advertised as safe enough for children to use. The ad also says it is not designed to replace commercial machines. The average milking time with the Henry milker is 10 minutes. Mike Henry says Millie now gives about 2 liters in half that time. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. What is your secret to gaining the cooperation of a goat at milking time? You can comment at voaspecialenglish.com or on Facebook or Twitter at VOA Learning English. I'm Mario Ritter with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Cacao or cocoa trees grow in hot, rainy areas of Africa, Asia, and Central and South America. Their beans are used to make cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and of course, chocolate. There are 5 to 6 million growers, maybe more. Many are poor family farmers with only a few hectares. West Africa produces more than half of all cocoa beans. Ivory Coast leads the world in production, followed by its neighbor, Ghana. The trees are usually in their 5th year when they start to grow the pods that contain the beans. The trees produce the most pods when they are 10, but they are still productive long after that. Workers use large knives to cut the lower pods and long tools to remove pods from high on the trees. Later, they break open the pods to remove the beans. A half gram of chocolate requires about 400 beans. The World Cocoa Foundation says an average pod contains 20 to 50 beans. And experts say growers may lose perhaps 1/3 of their harvest to disease and insects. But now scientists have genetic maps of 2 kinds of cocoa trees. These genomes are mostly complete and could lead scientists to new ways to increase production and prevent disease. Mapping genes is the first step to understanding an organism. Next comes learning the job of each gene. The American food company Mars took the lead in paying for mapping the genes of the Forastero cocoa tree. The Forastero provides 80 to 90% of the world's cocoa beans. Mars depends on those beans for its M&Ms and other chocolate candies. The company's research partners included several universities and the United States Department of Agriculture. The average West African cocoa farmer produces about 400 kilos of beans per hectare. But Howard-Yana Shapiro, head of plant science and external research at Mars, thinks that science could greatly increase the yield. A competitor of Mars, Hershey's, supported the gene mapping of the Criollo, a far less common cocoa tree. CIRAD, a French government research center, led scientists from 6 countries in creating that genome. We'll talk more about the cocoa industry next week when we look at efforts to help child laborers in Ivory Coast and Ghana. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. You can read and listen to our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Farmers in the United States have grown genetically engineered crops since the late 1990s. Now, a federal agency is deciding whether to let a genetically modified animal into the food supply for the first time. A company, Aqua Bounty Technologies, has developed the Aqua Advantage salmon. The fish is an Atlantic salmon that contains genes from 2 other kinds of fish, ocean pout and Chinook salmon. With these genes, it can grow twice as fast as a wild Atlantic salmon. The company says the fish does not taste or smell any different from other salmon. The Food and Drug Administration says there would be no need for special labeling if the salmon is found to have the same basic contents as other fish. But critics say the genetically changed salmon is different from other fish. They say if the FDA approves it for sale, people should be told what they are buying. Americans eat mostly imported seafood. Last year, that included $1 billion worth of imported salmon, one of the top imports. Most of the wild salmon caught in North America comes from Alaska. That state banned farmed salmon from its waters years ago. Alaska Senator Mark Begich is leading a group of other United States senators, organizations, and businesses to try to stop the FDA approval process. Winona Hodder of the activist group Food and Water Watch says the Aqua Advantage salmon has not been studied enough for food safety. She says the 3 studies have very small samples. The data is not available to the public. And one of the studies is 19 years old. Ms. Hodder worries that the farmed fish could escape into waterways and reproduce with wild populations. And she says the idea could spread to other countries. She says there are fish farming operations in China that are very interested in this and that have a poor record of enforcing rules. But the company says most of its fish are raised at inland fish farms. And it has promised the Food and Drug Administration that it would only market female salmon unable to reproduce. David Edwards at the Biotechnology Industry Organization says the genetically modified fish is just a new technology. He says he is willing to eat the fish if the FDA says it is safe. What are your thoughts on this subject? You can post comments at voaspecialenglish.com. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. American officials have sharply reduced their expectations for this year's corn and soybean crops. Farmers in the Midwest are struggling with record heat and the worst drought in years. The United States is the world's largest producer of corn and soybeans. In August, the Agriculture Department predicted that corn production would total 10.8 billion bushels this year. That was down 17% from a prediction made just the month before. And it was down 13% from last year's level. In addition, the average yield per hectare could be the lowest in 17 years. At the same time, the government predicted that soybean production would be 12% lower than last year. The price of maize, which Americans call corn, has hit record levels. Corn is a major part of animal feed, and so the price of meat, milk, and eggs is also expected to climb. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says average food prices worldwide rose 6% in July. The American drought was a big reason. Gawain Kripke is a food price expert with the anti-hunger group Oxfam America. He says drought in the United States affects the whole world because it is such a big food producer and exporter. The situation has renewed the fight between food and fuel. About 40% of the nation's corn crop goes into making ethanol. The production process leaves some of that in a form that can be fed to animals. Still, at least 1/4 of the American corn crop is now used for fuel. The United States requires that part of its corn crop be used in the production of biofuels. The use of ethanol has grown as government requirements have increased. But the head of the FAO, writing in the Financial Times, called for an immediate temporary suspension of that requirement. José Graziano da Silva said more of the American corn production could then be used as food or to feed animals. The American livestock industry is also urging Congress to suspend the 2005 law that requires ethanol in gasoline. But corn farmer Alan Bennett says doing that would hurt his town. This country relies on ethanol for 10% of its fuel supply, he says. Ethanol is good for America. The growth of the ethanol industry and competition for corn have helped parts of rural America that had been shrinking for years. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. American farmers first planted genetically engineered crops in 1996. Today, 80% of the cropland for soybeans, maize, and cotton in the United States is transgenic. Genetic engineering adds or changes genes in a plant to produce desired qualities. The United States is one of 25 countries where farmers planted genetically engineered crops in 2009. An agricultural biotechnology group says planting decreased in Europe, but the amount of cropland planted with the crops rose by an estimated 7% worldwide. The National Research Council, part of the National Academies in Washington, recently published a study. The study examined how genetically engineered crops have affected farming in the United States. It found that many farmers have better harvests, better weed control, and fewer losses from insect damage compared to traditional crops. Larissa Wolfenbarger is a University of Nebraska biology professor and a member of the committee that wrote the report. She says they found that genetically engineered crops can be better for the environment. For example, she noted that crops designed to resist damage by glyphosate need fewer pesticides that are more toxic to the soil. Glyphosate is a chemical used in Roundup and other weed-killing products. But some farmers have used so much glyphosate that a number of kinds of weeds can now resist it. David Irvin of Portland State University in Oregon led the committee that wrote the report. Professor Irvin says this means that some farmers are again using the more toxic herbicides to control weeds. He says the problem needs immediate attention. Earlier this year, a professor at the University of Western Australia commented on the overuse of glyphosate. Stephen Powles wrote about it in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States. He said, "Glyphosate is as important in worldwide food production as penicillin is in medicine for fighting disease." He called for better use of glyphosate-resistant crop technology. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can comment on our reports at our website, voaspecialenglish.com. You can also get our stories on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. Europe's deadly outbreak of a rare form of E. coli bacteria has brought new attention to food safety issues. One of the problems when people get sick from food is that the simplest question is often difficult or even impossible to answer. Just what did the people eat that made them sick? Of course, one way to avoid these medical mysteries is to keep dangerous organisms out of the food supply. This is easier said than done, but scientists keep trying. Scientists in the United States have developed an experimental system that uses a high-tech optical scanner. This inspection system is meant for packing houses where produce is sorted for market. The system is designed to identify the presence of contaminants like soil or animal waste on fresh produce. These can be sources of Escherichia coli, better known as E. coli. E. coli bacteria naturally live in the intestines of humans and many animals. Most kinds of E. coli are harmless, but some can make people sick. The new scanner can also show damage and imperfections that might make the produce unappealing to shoppers. Scientists designed the system at a Department of Agriculture research center in Beltsville, Maryland. Moon Kim of the Agricultural Research Service led the team. He says they were asked to develop a method to detect contamination in produce. So they started with the apple as their model sample. The scanner uses a high-speed camera placed over the conveyor belt that moves the produce along. As the apples move along the belt, the scanner captures images of each piece of fruit. The system is equipped with an ultraviolet lamp and a halogen lamp that produces near-infrared light. A spectrograph device can use the near-infrared light bouncing off of an apple to show evidence of damage. The ultraviolet light can show contaminants. Moon Kim says the team hopes the system will be available to the food industry in the next several years. The scanner can direct a sorting machine to separate the bad apples from the good ones. The system is currently able to show the surface of only half the apple as it speeds by. The inventors hope to improve the process so it can show the whole surface. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn American English and much more every day at voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Agriculture Report. Farms are spreading to unused city lots and old properties across the United States. These urban farms grow crops in areas where people rarely buy fresh fruits and vegetables. They have the power to change what people eat. They also have the power to influence troubled neighborhoods. Eco City Farms is an educational, nonprofit organization in Prince George's County, Maryland. It seeks to help the local community by teaching economic development, job training, and a healthier way of living. The group has set up farms near automobile repair businesses and fast food stores in urban neighborhoods. Social activist Margaret Morgan Hubbard founded Eco City Farms. She says the lack of fresh fruits and vegetables is a health problem for children and their families who live in nearby Bladensburg, Maryland. Eco City Farms offer several programs, including educational activities on agriculture, food, and finding jobs with environmentally friendly businesses. People can also learn how to cook healthier foods and teach others how to prepare meals. Recently, Philip Sidibe demonstrated his cooking skills. He prepared alako, a popular food in Cameroon, where he grew up. He and other young people not only cook their food, they also grow it in a large garden next to the Autumn Woods Apartments. Margaret Morgan Hubbard says the urban garden is an agent for change, and the young people are its newest supporters. She says young people work throughout the year, helping with the farm. They are not only farming food, but also making that food available to people who live in the community. For VOA Learning English, I'm Laurel Bowman.
This is the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. For the past year, the World Food Program has operated a project to prevent hunger in 21 countries in Africa. In the project, the United Nations agency works with small farmers to grow more and better produce. The World Food Program buys the produce through local cooperative associations. Then it distributes the products within the country or area. The project works mainly with women. Sheila Sisulu from the World Food Program says the project aims to break a cycle that keeps people hungry. The situation is when farmers have to sell their produce at low prices after harvest, when supplies are greatest. Then they have to pay high prices to buy food for themselves during the lean season, when supplies are limited. But when farmers produce more food, they can sell more. And when they produce high-quality food, they can get higher prices. They can also store food for themselves and have enough money to buy food if they need to during the lean season. Sheila Sisulu says the farmers are now starting to earn profits through the project. The Food and Agriculture Organization and the International Fund for Agricultural Development help the farmers choose the best seeds and fertilizers. They also advise the farmers on the quality levels that the World Food Program requires to buy their produce. Two other groups recently launched a separate effort to increase food security in Africa. The groups are the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa and the New Partnership for Africa's Development. They say African governments have to increase their investment in agriculture in order to fight problems related to climate change. The groups want the governments to develop programs in seeds, soil health, policy, and markets. Former United Nations Chief Kofi Annan is the chairman of AGRA. The group's president, Namanga Ngongi, says many African governments are not meeting a target of spending 10% of their national budgets on agriculture. But he says investment has risen from 4% of national budgets to probably 5.5% today. And that's the VOA Special English Agriculture Report. You can find transcripts, podcasts, and archives of our reports at voaspecialenglish.com.